I was halfway through my morning coffee when I saw Brenda standing on my front porch through the window, her fist raised to knock again. And I already knew this was going to be one of those days. The snow had started falling around 3 in the morning, and now at 8, there was already about 7 inches on the ground with no signs of stopping. The weather report had been talking about this storm for days, calling it the biggest blizzard to hit suburban Chicago in a decade. I opened the door before she could assault it again, and the cold wind nearly knocked me back. Brenda Patterson was the head of our homeowners association in Naperville, Illinois, and she wore that title like a crown. She was in her mid-50s, with short blonde hair that never moved in the wind, probably held in place by half a can of hairspray. And she had that particular expression that only comes from years of believing the world should bend to your will. "Tyler Garrison, I need to speak with you about your responsibilities," she announced, not even bothering with a greeting. "Good morning to you too, Brenda," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "Kind of early for an HOA house call, don't you think? This is important. I've been trying to reach you for the past 30 minutes. I glanced at my phone on the counter. Sure enough, there were 4 missed calls. I had been in the shower and hadn't heard them. Sorry, what's the emergency? The storm. I need you to come shovel my front steps and walkway immediately." I blinked at her, certain I had misheard. "You want me to what? Shovel my steps and my walkway? The snow is accumulating rapidly, and I have an important Zoom meeting in an hour. I cannot have a messy property in the background if I need to step outside." "Brenda, I'm not a snow removal service. I have my own driveway and walkway to deal with." Her face flushed red, which was quite a sight against the white backdrop of falling snow. As a member of this HOA community, we all have to help each other out. It's in the spirit of the neighborhood covenant. I had read that covenant front to back when I bought this house 2 years ago. The covenant says we have to maintain our own properties. It doesn't say anything about maintaining yours. I'm the HOA president, Tyler. I spend countless hours making sure this neighborhood stays beautiful and property values remain high. The least you can do is help me out during a storm. I help out by paying my HOA fees on time every month. Those fees, which you increased by 15% last year, I might add. She crossed her arms. Those increases were necessary for neighborhood improvements, like the decorative rocks around the community sign that nobody wanted. That sign is an investment in our community image. She was getting more agitated now, her voice rising over the wind. "Look, are you going to help me or not? I'm not shoveling your walkway, Brenda. I've got my own property to take care of, and then I have to get to work. You don't understand. I need this done now. Then call a snow removal company. There are about a dozen in Naperville." "They're all booked because of the storm," she snapped. "I already tried." "Then I guess you'll have to do it yourself like the rest of us." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're refusing to help a neighbor in need. I'm refusing to do your chores for you. That's different." "This is going in my report," she said, pulling out her phone. "You're in violation of community cooperation standards. There is no such thing in the covenant. You can't just make up rules, Brenda. We'll see about that." The next HOA board meeting is in 2 weeks, and I'll be proposing new bylaws about community assistance requirements. "Good luck with that," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do." I started to close the door, but she put her hand out to stop it. "I'm warning you, Tyler. If you don't help me, there will be consequences." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you of reality. This HOA has rules and standards, and I enforce them." "Not this one, you don't. Have a nice day, Brenda." I closed the door firmly and locked it. Through the window, I watched her stomp back down my walkway, which I hadn't shoveled yet, slipping twice before she made it to the street. She lived 3 houses down in a large colonial that had belonged to her parents before they passed. She had moved back to Naperville 5 years ago after a divorce, and according to the neighborhood gossip, she had made it her life's mission to control every aspect of the HOA ever since. My phone rang almost immediately. I looked at the screen. Brenda. I declined the call and went to get dressed in my snow gear. By the time I had pulled on my insulated pants, heavy coat, boots, hat, and gloves, she had called 3 more times. I ignored them all. The snow was coming down even harder when I stepped outside with my shovel. The wind whipped it into swirling patterns, and visibility was getting worse. I could barely see the house across the street. The weather app on my phone now showed we were under a blizzard warning until 6 that evening, with accumulations expected to reach 15 inches. I started on my driveway, working methodically. I had a snowblower, but it was temperamental and I didn't trust it in conditions like this. The shovel was more reliable, even if it was more work. I was about 20 minutes into the job when I saw Brenda emerge from her house again. She was bundled up, but she didn't have a shovel. Instead, she marched straight toward me. "Tyler," she called out. "I'm giving you one more chance to do the right thing." I kept shoveling. "And I'm giving you the same answer. No. You're being incredibly selfish. I'm being realistic. I'm not your personal maintenance crew. Everyone in this neighborhood helps each other. Really, because I don't remember you helping me when my fence blew down in that windstorm last spring. In fact, I remember you sending me a violation notice because it wasn't repaired within 72 hours, even though it took a week to get the contractor out here." Her mouth tightened. "That was different. That was an actual violation. And this is an actual boundary. I'm not doing your chores." She pulled out her phone, and for a moment, I thought she was going to call me again right in front of me, which would have been absurd even for her. Instead, she started poking at the screen with her gloved finger, having trouble with the touch screen. "What are you doing now?" I asked. "Calling for help since you won't provide it." "Calling who?" "The police." I actually laughed. "You're calling the cops because I won't shovel your sidewalk. I'm calling them because you're refusing to assist someone in need during a dangerous weather emergency. That's not illegal, Brenda. That's not even remotely illegal. We'll see what they have to say about it." I went back to shoveling, shaking my head. She wouldn't actually call 911 over something this ridiculous. It was a bluff, a power play to try to intimidate me into complying. I had dealt with her type before during my years working retail management before switching to corporate sales. People who thought if they escalated enough, threw a big enough fit, they would get their way. But then I heard her voice, shrill and panicked. "Yes, hello. I need police assistance immediately. I have a neighbor who is refusing to provide emergency assistance during the blizzard. I'm elderly and I can't do my own snow removal, and he's refusing to help me." I stopped shoveling and turned around. She was actually doing it. She was actually calling 911. "Brenda, hang up the phone," I said. She held up a finger to shush me. "Yes, I'm at 847 Maple Grove Drive in Naperville. The neighbor is at 823 Maple Grove Drive. His name is Tyler Garrison." She paused. "No, he's not threatening me physically, but his refusal to help is putting me in danger. What if I slip and fall trying to do it myself?" I walked over to her. "Give me the phone." "Stay back," she said, actually taking a step away from me. "Officer, he's approaching me now in a threatening manner." "I'm not threatening anyone," I said loudly, making sure whoever was on the other end could hear me. "I'm simply trying to stop her from wasting emergency services time during an actual blizzard when they have real emergencies to deal with." Brenda turned away, cupping her hand around the phone. "Please send someone as soon as possible. I don't feel safe." She hung up and looked at me with an expression of triumph. They're sending a unit. You just tied up 911 dispatch during a blizzard because I won't shovel your walkway. Do you understand how many actual emergencies are probably happening right now? Car accidents, people stranded, medical emergencies. My situation is an emergency. I'm a vulnerable elderly woman who needs help. You're 56 years old and you go to CrossFit 4 times a week. I've seen you carry in a new sectional sofa by yourself. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. You're not helpless, you're just entitled. Her face went red again. How dare you speak to me that way? I am the president of this HOA. And I'm a homeowner who pays his fees and follows the actual rules, not the made-up ones that suit you. There's no rule that says I have to shovel your property. There's a moral obligation. Then hire someone, or do it yourself, or wait for the storm to pass. Those are your options, and none of them involve me. A gust of wind hit us hard enough that we both staggered. The snow was getting worse, and standing out here arguing was becoming genuinely dangerous. My face was already numb. I'm going back to my shoveling, I said. You should go inside before you actually do slip and fall. I'm staying right here until the police arrive. Suit yourself. I returned to my driveway and continued working. The snow was accumulating faster than I could clear it, which meant I was going to have to do this whole thing again in a few hours. My back was already starting to ache. I was in decent shape for a 34-year-old guy, but shoveling heavy, wet snow was a different kind of workout. Brenda stood at the edge of my property, arms crossed, glaring at me. She looked ridiculous, like a snow-covered statue of indignation. After about 10 minutes, she must have gotten cold because she went back to her house, but I could see her watching from her front window. 20 minutes later, I saw the flash of red and blue lights through the snow. A Naperville Police Department SUV pulled up in front of my house, and an officer got out. He was a big guy, probably in his early 40s, and he looked distinctly unhappy about being out in this weather. I stuck my shovel in a snowbank and walked over to meet him. Officer, I apologize for this call. It's a complete waste of your time. Are you Tyler Garrison? Yes, sir. Can you tell me what's going on here? Before I could answer, Brenda came rushing out of her house, nearly falling on her unshoveled steps. Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is refusing to provide assistance during the storm. The officer looked between us, then at the snow that was still falling heavily. Madam, you called 911 because of a dispute with your neighbor. I called because I'm in danger. I need my walkway shoveled and he's refusing to help me. And you are, Brenda Patterson. I'm the HOA president for this neighborhood. The officer pulled out a notebook, but his pen was having trouble working in the cold. He gave up and just looked at both of us. Let me get this straight. You called emergency services because your neighbor won't shovel your walkway. He's violating HOA community cooperation standards. Madam, that's not a police matter. That's a civil HOA matter. But I need help. Have you tried calling a snow removal service? They're all booked. Then you'll need to do it yourself or wait until one becomes available. But calling 911 for this is inappropriate. We have actual emergencies to respond to. There have been 17 car accidents in the past 2 hours alone. Brenda's face flushed. So you're taking his side. I'm not taking anyone's side, madam. I'm telling you that this isn't a police matter. Your neighbor has no legal obligation to shovel your property. What about moral obligation, community responsibility? Again, not a legal issue. He turned to me. Sir, did you threaten her in any way? No, sir. I simply told her I wouldn't shovel her walkway and she should hire someone or do it herself. Did you use threatening language or gestures? No, sir. He turned back to Brenda. Madam, I'm going to advise you not to call 911 unless there's an actual emergency. Misuse of emergency services can result in citations. But I need help. Then I suggest you start shoveling, madam, or contact a non-emergency community service. But I need to get back on the road. We have real emergencies to deal with. Brenda looked like she was about to explode. This is unacceptable. I'm going to file a complaint. That's your right, madam. You can contact the department's administrative office on Monday. Now please, both of you, stay safe in this weather. The officer walked back to his SUV, shaking his head. I heard him say something into his radio that sounded like unfounded and domestic dispute, and then he drove off, his lights disappearing into the white curtain of snow. Brenda whirled on me. This is your fault. My fault. You called the cops on me for not doing your yard work. You humiliated me in front of that officer. You humiliated yourself. I told you not to call. You just wait. The next HOA meeting is going to be very interesting for you. Looking forward to it, I said, and I meant it. I was so tired of her power trips and manufactured authority. She stormed back to her house, slipping again on her steps. I almost offered to help then, out of basic human decency, but I knew if I did, it would set a precedent I'd never escape. Brenda was the type who would interpret any kindness as weakness and obligation. I went back to shoveling. It took me another 40 minutes to finish my driveway and walkway, and by the time I was done, I was exhausted. My back ached, my shoulders burned, and my face felt like it had been sandblasted. But at least my property was clear, at least temporarily. I went inside, stripped off my wet gear, and made another pot of coffee. My phone had 7 new missed calls, all from Brenda, and 3 text messages. I opened them against my better judgment. The first one read, "You will regret your selfishness today." The second, "I am documenting everything for the HOA board." The third, "You are in violation of community standards and will face consequences." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called my boss and told him I wouldn't be making it to the office. The roads were too dangerous, and honestly, after the morning I'd had, I needed a mental health break. He was understanding. Most of the sales team was working from home anyway because of the storm. I spent the rest of the morning working on my laptop at the kitchen table, periodically looking out the window at the accumulating snow. Around 11, I saw Brenda finally emerge with a shovel and start working on her walkway. It took her about an hour, and she looked miserable the entire time, but she got it done. See, I thought, she was perfectly capable. The snow didn't stop until around 5 in the evening, just as the forecast had predicted. We ended up with about 14 inches total, and the whole neighborhood looked like a Christmas card. Beautiful, but a massive pain to deal with. I went out and did a second round of shoveling on my driveway, which took another hour. That evening, I got an email from the HOA. It was a mass message to all residents, but I had a feeling it was primarily directed at me. Dear homeowners, during times of crisis and severe weather, it is essential that we come together as a community to help one another. The strength of our neighborhood lies in our ability to support our fellow residents, especially the elderly and those who may struggle with physical tasks. It has come to my attention that during today's blizzard, some residents chose not to extend a helping hand to their neighbors. This lack of community spirit is disappointing and goes against the values we strive to uphold in Maple Grove Estates. At the next HOA board meeting on February 18th, I will be proposing new bylaws regarding mandatory community assistance during weather emergencies. All residents are encouraged to attend. Remember, a strong community is built on mutual support and cooperation. Sincerely, Brenda Patterson, HOA President, Maple Grove Estates, I read it twice, then forwarded it to my buddy Jake, who lived 2 streets over. He was also fed up with Brenda's overreach. He responded within minutes. "Is she serious? Mandatory assistance? That's insane," I called him. "She's completely serious. She tried to force me to shovel her walkway this morning." "What happened?" I told him the whole story, including the part about her calling 911. He was laughing so hard I thought he was going to drop the phone. "She actually called the cops. That's a new level of crazy even for her. The officer basically told her to get lost and stop wasting emergency services." "Good. Listen, you need to come to that meeting. I'll spread the word to some of the other homeowners. We're all sick of her making up rules as she goes along." "I'll be there. And I'm going to bring a printed copy of the actual covenant to remind everyone what we actually signed." "Perfect. This is going to be good." Over the next 2 weeks, the incident became neighborhood legend. Multiple people reached out to me after hearing various versions of the story. Brenda, it turned out, had been telling people that I had been aggressive and threatening during our confrontation, and that the police had sided with her and warned me about my behavior. The truth, according to those who had seen part of it or heard from others who had, was quite different. I didn't engage in the gossip much, but I did make sure people knew that they could request the police report if they wanted the actual facts. I had called the Naperville Police Department's non-emergency line and confirmed that there was a report on file documenting the call as an unfounded civil dispute with no basis for police involvement. The weeks passed quickly. We had 2 more snowstorms, though neither as bad as that first blizzard. I made sure my property was always immaculately maintained, giving Brenda no legitimate reason to cite me for violations. I also did some research on Illinois HOA law and discovered that HOAs had far less power than most people thought. They couldn't enforce rules that weren't explicitly written in the covenant, and they couldn't create new rules without a vote of the homeowners, not just the board. I also discovered that Brenda had been playing fast and loose with HOA funds. The financial reports she filed were vague at best, and when I cross-referenced them with the work that had supposedly been done in the neighborhood, the numbers didn't add up. Those decorative rocks around the community sign, for example, had supposedly cost $8,000 according to the financial report. But when I called the landscaping company that had done the work, they told me the actual cost had been $4,200. Where had the other $3,800 gone? I started compiling a file. Bank statements that I could access as a dues-paying member of the HOA, vendor invoices that didn't match reported expenses, work that had been billed for but never completed. The picture that emerged was ugly. Brenda had been systematically inflating costs and pocketing the difference, likely for years. February 18th finally arrived. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 in the evening at the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was mostly used for events and meetings. I arrived at 6:45 with my file folder full of documents and found the parking lot already filling up. Apparently, word had gotten out that this was going to be an interesting meeting. Inside, the main room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a table at the front where Brenda and the other 2 board members sat. The board consisted of Brenda as president, a retired accountant named Harold Chen as treasurer, and a middle-aged woman named Susan Moore as secretary. I had always gotten the impression that Harold and Susan were mostly there because Brenda had strong-armed them into the positions, and they were too conflict-averse to say no. I took a seat in the 3rd row and nodded to Jake, who was sitting across the aisle. The room continued to fill up. By 7, there were probably 60 people in attendance, which was extraordinary. Most HOA meetings drew maybe 10 residents, and half of those were board members' spouses. Brenda called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. She looked pleased at the turnout, probably thinking people had come to support her new bylaws. She was in for a surprise. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight despite the cold weather. It's wonderful to see such community engagement." She shuffled some papers. "We have several items on the agenda tonight, but I want to start with a proposal for new community assistance bylaws that I believe are essential for maintaining the spirit of our neighborhood." A hand shot up in the back. "Point of order." Brenda frowned. "We haven't gotten to open comment yet." "I understand, but I'd like to know if these proposed bylaws were reviewed by an attorney to ensure they're legal under Illinois HOA law." It was Martin Reeves, a lawyer who lived on Oak Street. I hadn't known he was coming, but I was glad he was here. Brenda's frown deepened. "I don't believe we need an attorney to review common-sense community standards. Actually, under Illinois Statute 765 Ilks 160, any modifications to HOA covenants or bylaws must be reviewed for compliance with state law and require a vote of the homeowners, not just board approval." "Have these proposed bylaws been distributed to the community for review?" "Well, no. I was planning to present them tonight." "Then they can't be voted on tonight. Illinois law requires a minimum 30-day notice period for any votes on bylaw changes. Plus, homeowners must receive written copies of the proposed changes before the vote." Brenda's face was turning red. "I am the president of this HOA, and I believe I know how to run a meeting." Martin stood up. "With all due respect, Brenda, your personal authority doesn't override state law. If you attempt to pass new bylaws tonight without following proper procedure, any resulting rules will be legally unenforceable and the board could be held liable." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Brenda looked flustered, which was a new look for her. "Fine," she snapped. "We'll table the bylaw discussion for now and distribute written proposals next month. But I still want to address the issue that prompted this. We have residents in this community who refuse to act like good neighbors." All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of 60 gazes and kept my expression neutral. During the blizzard 2 weeks ago, I asked a neighbor for simple assistance with snow removal. I was told, quite rudely, that it wasn't his problem. When I called emergency services for help, this neighbor made me look foolish in front of the responding officer. Jake stood up. "You made yourself look foolish by calling 911 over a civil dispute. That officer could have been responding to an actual emergency. Someone could have died while he was dealing with your tantrum." "It wasn't a tantrum," Brenda shot back. "It was a legitimate request for help." "No," I said, standing up. "It was an entitled demand that I do your chores for you. I have no legal or moral obligation to shovel your walkway, and you know it. You have a community obligation. Show me where in the covenant it says that." Brenda opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't because it wasn't there. I pulled out my folder. "Actually, since we're talking about obligations, I'd like to discuss yours. As HOA president, you have an obligation to manage the association's funds responsibly and transparently." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. "According to the financial report you filed last April, the HOA spent $8,000 on landscaping around the community entrance sign. But according to the invoice from Greenscape Landscaping, the actual cost was $4,200. Where did the other $3,800 go?" The room went completely silent. Harold, the treasurer, looked shocked. "What? Let me see that." I handed him the documents. He studied them, his frown deepening. "Brenda, this is a serious discrepancy. The report you gave me to review showed 8,000. There must be a mistake in the vendor invoice, Brenda said, but her voice wavered. I called them directly to confirm, I said. They sent me a certified copy. It's accurate. I pulled out more papers. That's not the only discrepancy. In June, we supposedly spent $6,000 on mailbox repairs. The actual invoiced amount was $3,200. In August, pool maintenance was reported at $5,000. Actual cost, $2,800. In October, parking lot resurfacing was reported at $12,000. Actual cost, $7,500. Harold was pale now. Brenda, you told me you were handling the vendor payments directly. I did. Then where is the rest of the money? There are administrative costs, processing fees. Show me the receipts, Harold said firmly. Right now. Brenda stood up, grabbing her papers. I don't have to answer to this witch hunt. I have been working tirelessly for this community. And apparently stealing from it, Jake called out. I have not stolen anything, Martin stood again. Brenda, if there are legitimate explanations for these discrepancies, you should provide them. If you can't, then the board needs to suspend your access to HOA funds immediately and launch an audit. You can't do that. Actually, we can, Susan said quietly. She had been silent until now, but she looked disturbed by what she was hearing. The bylaws give the board authority to call for audits and suspend financial access if there's suspected misuse of funds. Brenda looked around the room, seeing no allies, only angry and suspicious faces. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. If you leave, we'll vote to remove you as president, Harold said. Stay and explain yourself or resign. I'm not resigning, and you can't remove me without cause. Financial impropriety is cause, Martin said. More than enough cause. Brenda grabbed her coat. I'm not listening to this anymore. You people are ungrateful. I have given years to this neighborhood, and this is how you repay me. She stormed toward the door, but I called out, Brenda, wait. She turned, her expression venomous. What? If you leave now, I'm taking this information to the police tomorrow. Misappropriation of HOA funds is fraud. It's a criminal matter, not just a civil one. She laughed, but it sounded forced. You wouldn't dare. Try me. You called the cops on me for not shoveling your snow. I'm happy to call them on you for actual crimes. The room erupted in conversation. Everyone was talking at once. Harold banged on the table for order. Everyone, please. This is serious. He turned to Brenda. You need to provide a full accounting of every expense over the past year. Every receipt, every invoice, every bank statement. If you can explain these discrepancies, fine. If you can't, then I have to agree with Tyler. This becomes a police matter. Brenda's face had gone from red to pale. You're all conspiring against me. No one's conspiring, Susan said. We just want the truth. Either you can account for the missing money or you can't. Which is it? Brenda looked around the room one more time, and I saw something crack in her expression. The imperious confidence was gone, replaced by panic. I needed that money. The room went silent again. You needed it, Harold said slowly. Brenda, that's not your money, that's community funds. I know, but I had expenses. My house, my car payment, my credit cards. The divorce left me with nothing, and I was drowning. I thought I could just borrow it temporarily and pay it back before anyone noticed. How much? Harold asked quietly. I don't know exactly. Maybe $25,000 over 3 years. Someone in the back gasped. That was a substantial amount of money. $25,000, Harold repeated. You stole $25,000 from this HOA. I was going to pay it back. When? How? Brenda didn't answer. She just stood there, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked small and defeated. Martin spoke up. Brenda, you need to get a lawyer. This is beyond HOA discipline. This is theft. I know, she whispered, Harold turned to the room. "I'm calling for an emergency vote. All in favor of immediately removing Brenda Patterson as HOA president and suspending her access to all HOA accounts, say aye." A chorus of ayes filled the room. Not a single person opposed. The motion carries. "Brenda, you're no longer president. I'm also recommending that we contact the police." "Please," Brenda said, and she was crying now. "Please don't. I'll pay it all back. I'll sell my house if I have to. Just don't call the police." I actually felt a twinge of sympathy for her. She had made terrible choices, but seeing her break down like this was uncomfortable. Still, she had called the cops on me over snow shoveling. She had tried to abuse her authority to control people, and she had stolen from the entire community. "That's not our decision to make," I said. "This is a crime, Brenda. It has to be reported." She looked at me with pure hatred through her tears. "I hope you're happy. You've ruined my life. You ruined your own life when you started stealing." She left then, stumbling out into the cold February night. The room erupted in conversation again, everyone processing what had just happened. Harold called for order once more. "Okay, everyone, here's what's going to happen. First thing tomorrow morning, I'm contacting the bank and changing all access codes and passwords. Then I'm going to compile every financial document I can find and review them thoroughly. If the discrepancies are as bad as they appear, I'll be contacting the Naperville Police Department to file a report. In the meantime, Susan, you're acting president until we can hold proper elections." Susan nodded, looking overwhelmed. "I'll do my best." The meeting wrapped up shortly after that. People came up to me to shake my hand, thank me for doing the research, and share their own stories about Brenda's abuses of power. Apparently, I wasn't the only one she had tried to push around over the years. Jake clapped me on the shoulder as we walked out. "Well, you definitely made that meeting interesting. I didn't mean for it to go that way. I just wanted to shut down her ridiculous snow shoveling bylaw. By exposing her as a thief, that's one way to do it. She brought it on herself. If she had just let it go, I never would have looked into the finances. Good thing you did. Who knows how much more she would have stolen." We walked to our cars through the cold parking lot. The stars were out, bright and clear in the winter sky. "You think they'll actually arrest her?" Jake asked. "Probably. $25,000 in fraud. That's serious. That's not just a fine, that's jail time. Karma's a hell of a thing." "Yeah," I agreed. "Yeah, it really is." True to Harold's word, the police were contacted the next day. A detective from the Naperville Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit came to interview Harold, Susan, and me over the following week. I provided all my documentation, and Harold gave them access to 3 years of HOA bank records. The investigation took about a month. During that time, Brenda stopped coming to any neighborhood events or even leaving her house much. I saw her a few times through the window, looking haggard and defeated. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I just felt relief that her reign of HOA terror was over. In late March, I was working from home when I saw a police car pull up in front of Brenda's house. 2 officers got out and knocked on her door. She answered, talked with them for a few minutes, and then went inside. She emerged a few minutes later with a coat on, and they put her in the back of the police car. I watched from my window as they drove away. Later, I found out from Harold that she had been arrested on multiple counts of theft and financial fraud. The total amount she had stolen was actually closer to $31,000, not the $25,000 she had admitted to. Some of the discrepancies went back even further than I had researched. Her lawyer tried to work out a plea deal, but the state's attorney wasn't sympathetic. Brenda had been in a position of trust, and she had systematically abused that trust to steal from her neighbors. In late May, she pleaded guilty to felony theft, and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to make full restitution to the HOA. She sold her house to help pay back what she owed. A nice young couple with a baby bought it in June, and they were about 1,000 times more pleasant than Brenda had ever been. The HOA held elections in April, and Susan was officially voted in as president. She ran on a platform of transparency and common sense, and she won by a landslide. Harold stayed on as treasurer, and they brought in new blood for the secretary position, a retired teacher named Margaret Foster who was organized and detail-oriented. The new board's first official act was to commission a complete audit of the HOA finances and to implement new oversight procedures to prevent anything like Brenda's theft from happening again. They also made it clear that the HOA would stick to enforcing the actual rules in the covenant, not made-up rules designed to control people. Life in the neighborhood improved dramatically. Without Brenda prowling around looking for violations, people relaxed. There were more block parties, more neighborly interactions, more actual community feeling. It turned out that real community wasn't built through threats and demands, but through mutual respect and people voluntarily helping each other. Ironically, the next big snowstorm we had that winter, several of us went around helping elderly residents with their shoveling without being asked or forced. We did it because we wanted to, because it was the right thing to do, not because some petty tyrant demanded it. That's how community is supposed to work. I ran into Brenda's lawyer one day at a coffee shop in downtown Naperville. He recognized me from the proceedings and came over to talk. "You know, she blames you for everything," he said. I figured, but I didn't make her steal $30,000. No, but in her mind, if you had just shoveled her walkway that day, none of this would have happened. She wouldn't have been angry, wouldn't have called the police, wouldn't have escalated things to the point where you started investigating the finances. That's a lot of mental gymnastics to avoid taking responsibility, he shrugged. That's kind of been her pattern from what I can tell. Everything is always someone else's fault. How's she doing in there? Not great. Prison is hard on everyone, but especially hard on people who are used to being in control. She's just another inmate now with no authority over anyone. I know I should probably feel worse about it than I do. Why? You didn't do anything wrong. She committed crimes and got caught. That's on her, not you, still. If I had just shoveled her stupid walkway, then she'd still be stealing from the HOA, just with you as her personal snow removal service. You didn't ruin her life. You stopped her from ruining more lives, including her own. She was going to get caught eventually. You just sped up the timeline. I thought about that a lot over the following months. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was always where Brenda was headed, and I just happened to be the catalyst that brought it to light. Or maybe if I had just been a little more flexible, a little more willing to help a neighbor in need, things would have turned out differently. But then, I remembered the way she had treated me that day in the snow. The entitlement, the threats, the complete lack of respect for boundaries. And I realized that no, I had made the right choice. You can't let bullies win just because it's easier in the short term. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it leads to consequences you never intended. The neighborhood thrived under the new leadership. Property values actually went up once word got out that we had cleaned house and restored sanity to the HOA. People who had been considering moving because of Brenda's nonsense decided to stay. New families moved in and found a welcoming, reasonable community instead of the police state Brenda had been trying to create. I stayed in touch with the developments of Brenda's case through Harold, who received updates since the restitution was being paid to the HOA. She served 18 months of her 2-year sentence and was released on good behavior. As part of her probation, she was required to stay away from any HOA leadership positions and to continue making monthly restitution payments. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to an apartment in Aurora after her release, about a 20-minute drive from Naperville. She was working as a receptionist at a dental office, a far cry from her days as an all-powerful HOA president. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about that day in the snow, if she ever connected the dots between her demanding I shovel her walkway and where she ended up. Probably not. Some people never learn. As for me, I continued living in my house on Maple Grove Drive, paying my HOA fees on time, maintaining my property according to the actual rules, and being a good neighbor when and how I chose to be, not because someone demanded it. I shoveled my own walkway during storms and sometimes helped others with theirs when I had the time and energy. But it was always my choice, done out of genuine care, not coerced compliance. Every time it snowed, though, I couldn't help but think back to that morning 2 years ago, standing in my driveway with a shovel while Brenda called 911 over my refusal to do her chores. It seemed so absurd in retrospect, such a small thing to have sparked such massive consequences. But I guess that's how life works sometimes. Small moments of standing up for yourself can ripple out in ways you never expect. The neighborhood erected a new community sign in the spring, paid for with legitimate HOA funds and properly accounted for in the financial records. It was beautiful, with carved wood and attractive plantings around it. No overpriced decorative rocks this time, just honest work done by local contractors for fair prices. Every time I drove past it, I felt a sense of pride in what we had accomplished as a community. We had rooted out corruption, restored integrity, and built something better together. Jake and I still joked about the incident sometimes when we had beers in his backyard during the summer. Remember when Brenda thought she could force you to be her personal snow removal service? He'd say, laughing, "Remember when she called 911 like I was a violent criminal?" I'd respond. We'd laugh about it, but underneath the humor was a genuine appreciation for how things had turned out. Not perfectly, Brenda's life had been destroyed after all, and that was hard to celebrate even when it was deserved, but better. Much better than they would have been if she had continued unchecked, stealing from neighbors and abusing her little slice of power. The following winter brought more snow, as Illinois winters always do. This time, when the first big storm hit, I was prepared. I had a new snowblower that actually worked reliably, and I made quick work of my driveway. When I was done, I looked down the street toward where Brenda used to live. The young couple was out there with their toddler, building a snowman in the front yard. The dad waved at me, and I waved back. That's what community should look like, I thought. Not threats and demands and manufactured authority, but just people living their lives, being decent to each other, helping when they can and want to. Simple. Human. Real. I went inside, made myself some hot chocolate, and watched the snow continue to fall through my kitchen window. My phone was quiet. No angry calls from HOA presidents demanding I do their yard work. No threats of violations or consequences. Just peace. In the end, that's all I had ever wanted. Just to live in my house, follow the actual rules, and be left alone unless I chose to engage. It shouldn't have been too much to ask, but with people like Brenda in the world, sometimes you have to fight for something as simple as reasonable boundaries. I did fight, not by choice initially, but I saw it through once it started. And while the path that fight took surprised everyone, including me, I couldn't argue with the results. A corrupt HOA president was exposed and held accountable. A neighborhood was freed from petty tyranny. And I learned that sometimes refusing to shovel someone's walkway is about a lot more than snow. It's about standing up to bullies. It's about exposing corruption. It's about maintaining your boundaries even when pressured. It's about the fact that doing the right thing doesn't always feel comfortable, but it's still right. Would I do it all again if I could go back to that snowy morning, knowing everything that followed, all the drama and investigation and eventual criminal proceedings? Honestly, yes. Because the alternative was continuing to live under Brenda's thumb, watching her steal from my neighbors and abuse her position, all while being too intimidated to say no to unreasonable demands. Sometimes you have to be willing to weather a storm, metaphorical or literal, to get to clearer skies on the other side. That morning during the blizzard, I chose to weather it, and while I never could have predicted where that choice would lead, I'm glad I made it. The neighborhood of Maple Grove Estates in Naperville, Illinois, is better for it. The people who live here are better for it. And I like to think I'm better for it too, knowing that I stood my ground when it mattered, even over something as seemingly trivial as shoveling snow. Because in the end, it was never really about the snow at all. It was about power, boundaries, respect, and the importance of saying no when someone tries to abuse all three. That's a lesson worth learning, even if the teacher is a bitter HOA president making unreasonable demands during a blizzard. And that's my story. The story of how I refused to shovel an entitled HOA president's walkway, got the police called on me for it, and ended up exposing systematic financial fraud that sent her to prison. Life has a funny way of working out sometimes. You never know where standing up for yourself might lead, but I've learned it's usually somewhere better than the place you'd end up if you hadn't. These days, when new neighbors move into Maple Grove Estates, they often hear the story. It's become part of neighborhood lore, a cautionary tale about the dangers of HOA overreach and the importance of maintaining proper oversight of community funds. Some people think I'm a hero. Some probably think I'm the guy who ruined Brenda's life over snow shoveling. I'm neither, really. I'm just a guy who said no when it was appropriate to say no, and who followed through when I uncovered wrongdoing. That's all any of us can do, really. Stand up for ourselves, hold people accountable when they abuse power, and try to make our little corners of the world a bit better than we found them. If a story about refusing to shovel a walkway can teach that lesson, then maybe all the drama and craziness was worth it after all. So next time you're faced with an unreasonable demand from someone in authority, whether it's an HOA president or anyone else, remember my story. Remember that you have the right to say no. Remember that people in positions of power don't always deserve to be there. And remember that sometimes, standing your ground in a small moment can lead to big changes you never expected. And if you live in an HOA, for the love of everything holy, pay attention to the finances. Because if someone like Brenda can steal $30,000 right under everyone's noses, it can happen anywhere. Demand transparency. Ask questions. Don't assume that just because someone has a title, they're acting in your best interests. These are the lessons I learned from refusing to shovel an HOA president's steps during a storm. Not the lessons I expected to learn when I woke up that snowy morning 2 years ago, but important ones nonetheless. And every winter since, when the first snow falls and I head out with my shovel to clear my driveway, I think about those lessons and smile. Because I know that I live in a community that values honesty over authority, transparency over control, and mutual respect over forced compliance. And that's worth more than any amount of cleared snow could ever be.